morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on the Blowback Roundtable. We got episode 36. Ben is under the weather today, so we sent him on assignment to Siberia, but he should be feeling better soon and hopefully back with us, hopefully for Friday's episode. Carlo is thankfully here. How are you doing, Carlo?
Still alive, barely.
Still
alive.
Excellent. And then Dust James, our special guest, Dust James is a working man, and he has thankfully decided, is able to join us from work. So we're hoping he's going to drive safely. We're not going to get too heated with things, and he'll be able to focus on both tasks. So let's just talk about the title of our show. It's The Runway is Getting Shorter. And that is a reference to Rear Admiral Kirby's quote regarding the West's ability to continue to support Ukraine. So he said, quote, "The runway is getting shorter. We have until about the end of the year before it becomes very, very difficult for us to continue to support Ukraine. And the end of the year is coming." So Carlo was good enough to point out before the show that the end of the year is actually just a couple weeks away. The signs have been all around us from the very beginning that this endeavor was going to be futile. This try to support Ukraine, regime change Russia. Those of us that pay attention knew from the very beginning it was going to be futile. But yet we had to deal with the mainstream media pushing this narrative that, the ruble's going to be rubble. Putin is going to get overthrown. NATO will be victorious. And we were just like, what? And so, the signs have recently become more and more obvious that the narratives are going to have to adjust to reality. So the reality that, again, those of us that pay attention, could have told we're telling everyone from the very beginning. But so it's great. It's great that, the narratives are collapsing in on them, and they're going to have to deal with that. And hopefully it's going to help people wake up and understand, the reality of the situation. But again, reality is the enemy of, the entrenched ruling establishment. They want to keep us as isolated and far away as possible from understanding reality. Isn't that right, Dust?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I know I'm not like super excited about this news. Like it was going to happen. The amount of money they were sending was astronomical. Actually stealing from us, from U.S. workers, from our infrastructure, from our health care. We workers pay a higher amount of taxes than they should, as well as being exploited on the jobs, both of those things. But it was unsustainable, the level of support they were sending. I don't think they're going to end support, though. They're going to continue funding the Nazis and so forth. I think if you look at the US Imperialists, don't listen to what they're saying, but look at what they've done and what their real objectives have been, which have been to maintain monopoly super profits of the monopoly capitalists. And when doing that, what serves them is instability and weakening rival forces. And they have accomplished their goals and continue to accomplish their goals. They funded the Ukrainian Nazis all the way back World War II. They successfully carried out a coup against democratically elected government that was neutral between the West and Russia. And they've been funding these Nazis, and the main purpose was never to save Ukraine, never anything to do with the Ukrainian people. It was to inflict as much damage on the Russian people and their economic system as possible. And they have done it. And they've been able to extort resources to their weapons lobby friends, and those weapons will get into other hands and create more enemies for them to supposedly fight and sell more weapons and create more instability and keep the United States on top, which is their goal. I think in the long run they're going to lose, but they're doing very well right now and accomplishing all the goals they set out to do, which is
Yeah.
create mass destruction.
Yeah, well, there's
I mean,
strategy. Go ahead, Carlo.
no, I just want to say, I mean, everything that Dust said and you said is correct. I'd like to add that they have other ways of subsidizing these destabilizations. We have the intelligence community. We've learned anything from the Phoenix program, Iran Contra, and any number of other. I mean, they're legion. I mean, Indonesia in 1965, Brazil in 1965. They had ways of accomplishing their goals, or at least reestablishing goals. I think in Ukraine, for whatever reason, I think all along they knew Ukraine could not defeat Russia seriously. U.S. U.S. intelligence, but they helped to boost the military industrial complex. They blew up the Nord Stream pipeline so that now East of Europe is paying far more for gas. But the delusion is separate from that. Like Zelensky, you could call him delusionary, just asked for more hundreds of, I think it was, I might be wrong about this, but I think it's $400 billion more in aid from the West, and wanted the West to provide Ukraine with tens of millions more of 155 caliber artillery shells, which anybody, I mean, Ritter and McGregor are right about this. That can't be produced. There's not the capacity to even come close to producing that kind of weaponry. And another thing that I find intriguing is what they're gonna do. I think, and I'm sure what the Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency is telling Ukraine, and this is supported by the fact that Ukraine just blew up 2 strategic bridges that would not allow, that would hamper a Russian counter invasion at this point. So I think what they're telling them is this: dig in their heels, get ready for a guerrilla warfare.
Yeah.
And Scott Ritter, for example, has changed his tune about Odessa. He says now it looks likely that that the Russians will try to take Odessa and go right all the way over to Transnistria and cut off the Black Sea route for Ukraine. And he's got a sound theory for that. The stupid Ukrainians and their allies initiated a number of drone strikes on the Russian military harbor at Sevastopol, and they hurled many hundreds of drones at that, and occasionally they had a hit, and that was enough to make the Russians move their fleet out of Sevastopol to safer quarters in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. So that in and of itself would tell the Russians, look, they can't have Odessa, as that's not in the cards anymore. And I think Scott has come around to, some people's, was one of my initial things, that they would have to the Russians would be forced to take Odessa, but we'll see. But yes, the end of conventional warfare is near, but I think we're still going to hear things like 1,000 Russians are being killed every day, and we send us, I don't know what the number was. It was like 10 million shells or something. We're still going to hear that stuff, and people are still going to swallow that stuff. So, Anyway,
Yeah,
that's my 2 cents.
400 billion and a promise of 10 million shells
That's
will
it.
guarantee that Ukraine will be victorious. So that's the new line. But yeah, nobody really believes that anymore. I mean, in the establishment or in the population here. We've already given them a couple armies, right? We created the first army, it was destroyed. We created a second army that was destroyed. Now we think, well, just one more army. I don't know. I mean. And then Scott was, I remember asking Scott about Odessa and, taking the land bridge connecting to Transnistria, like a couple months after the SMO started. And it always seemed like a logical step. And especially if that coast is being used to, force Russia out of the Black Sea because of the ever-present threat of these, drones, these underwater drones. I'm thinking, either, they can use it as leverage saying, hey, we're going to take it unless you agree to this. But the problem is, can you trust any agreement with Ukraine? Like, I mean, can you come to some kind of agreement? Because they've had agreements. There was Minsk 1, there was Minsk 2. How stupid is Putin to say that, okay, we've come to an agreement. Like, nobody's going to support Putin if he comes to an agreement with the Nazis in Ukraine and the US. That's going to be meaningless, which means, it's tough. It's tough to see how there can be any kind of a peaceful resolution just because the U.S. is agreement incapable. And Dust is exactly right with what he was saying, about the U.S. It's just going to change its strategy. They're not gonna give up. They haven't surrendered. They're not surrendering to the forces of a multipolarism. They're just saying, okay, hey, this one tactic we were applying to try and defeat Russia on the battlefield is not going to work. So let's try something else. And they do have a lot of resources. I mean, they have unlimited resources because guess what? They have a printing press. And the world runs on US dollars still, even though that US, the share of the market share on the US dollar is shrinking. It's still the biggest of any other currency, So
I want to respond to I actually have a word of caution on. I agreed with mostly everything that was said, but some of the phrasing from both of you I thought was kind of interesting. Maybe I would have done it differently, and they can explain why. First off, with brother Carlo, and I love how he gets passionate. He says the stupid Ukrainians, and I think it's really correct when talking about the Nazi imposed government. But if you look back, I actually did a panel discussion recently, and we had the honor of having a comrade who is from Ukraine and still has family on both sides of the conflict. And it's always important to make a distinction between the Nazi regime and the masses of the people. I think the way Slava was, I think she loves the Ukrainian people and she loves her country, and she hopes that the Nazis are overthrown and pushed out, and they can actually have a democracy and decide who they would like to trade with. That's the first one, I think. And then Billy Bob, I think your comment, well, just the way you phrase things, which is similar, which is also the distinction between the people and the imperialists. And I don't know, anytime somebody says we when referring to they military and they acts of aggression and their lies, I'm just like, nah, I'm with the workers and the oppressed. That ain't my military. I know it's an enemy. I'm not going to be confused by, they say we invade people.
Yeah.
No,
it's
yeah.
really impossible for me not to fall into that paradigm. That paradigm is so indoctrinated. And I bring up the same point. I say, I shouldn't say we when I'm referring to the US imperialists, but I still say we. And then I use the word they too. And you're exactly right, Dust. There's no doubt.
Carlo can respond.
Carlo. I kind of agree with what Dust is saying, but if you want to talk about individual people, I mean, first of all, there was that film, that piece of tape, that video that they were showing, where this young singer was singing to Ukrainian troops, and she was dancing around the room and singing, and you had this like 100 or 200 or so troops sitting there listening, and they were all very glum, and they were all at least middle aged. So yes, I think that segment of the population might be disillusioned now.
Hmm.
They I think people I think there might be a lot of change going on in the general population in Ukraine, because just like America, they've been lied to. I went through the Vietnam War thing. That's exactly what happened. At first, if somebody like me walked down the street with my long hair, they wanted to kill me. They wanted to kill me, literally beat the shit out of me. Okay. And that changed as soon as they began to realize that the Pentagon Papers came out. Westmoreland was the asshole he was, huge military asshole. They began to realize, the Tet Offensive. They began to realize that they were being lied to, and people changed. And I'll give you one anecdote. And I was being published in a literary journal by a fine visualist poet in Ukraine, and he's Ukrainian. And his name was Vladimir. What's his last name? Anyway, I won't even mention his last name. And I brought up this notion of art and Ukraine and the Donbass, and he said he said he didn't care if every Russian speaker in Ukraine was killed, was murdered. Okay, this is a guy. I thought, well, he's an artist. He's going to have some, that's my assumption. He's going to have some liberal aspect of things. But to change that topic a little bit, because we don't know what's in the heart of everybody that's here. I mean, with every individual that's down there, and we can't speak about the people. And this is a point I tried to make to Montero's group, Dr. Montero's group. So you can't speak to as that it's like it's a lumpen proletariat. They're all on the same page, because everybody's not on the same page. And what's happened in Ukraine, and probably can't be ignored, is that Hamas has crashed the party, and now you have Israel involved, and you have different here in Washington. You have two different groups of people, two different that are going to Congress and buying Congress. And if you think the Israelis don't have more wherewithal to buy Congress than the Ukrainians, there's a bridge that's made out of fentanyl that I want to sell you, and because the Israeli it's completely turned now. So when Kirby makes this statement about Ukraine has 2 more weeks, the whole operation in Ukraine has been turned over to somebody else that's behind the scenes, and the complexion of that conflict is going to change, and that's what it says, because now the focus is going to be on Israel. Israel is going to get whatever it wants from the U.S. government for infinity. There will be at the end of the year, we will not be supplying Israel with any more wherewithal, any more weapons or support. Now, the sad part about Ukraine is it's not just weapons. It's people's pensions. It's people's salaries. The general population who bought into all of this. The United States has been paying for all of that. They've been paying for street cleaning. They've been paying for elderly pensioners. They've been subsidizing food. They've been subsidizing the hospitals. All of that, and that may or may not come to an end. I don't know how much the entities who this will be sent to, that's the Central Intelligence Agency primarily, how much they give a rat's rectum about some old retired Ukrainian, Ukrainian's pension. Probably not a whole lot. So I think there's going to be suffering among the Ukrainian people in general, like we haven't seen since World War II.
I just want to add a clarification If you look at the majority of the money that the United States government sent to Ukraine, a lot of it never left the U.S. It went
Yeah.
straight to weapons manufacturers, and then you got to think about, okay, well, maybe they tried to like boost up their infrastructure, maybe some schools or hospitals or pension funds. So this is already a very small portion of it to begin with. But the only reason they did it is because the lies were so big, and also like they're telling such horrible lies, and they were trying to cover up the crime of what neoliberal policies had been doing to the country after the coup. If you look before the coup, and they had a neutral government, there was problems, there was corruption. But then when the coup came to power, they attacked the unions, they slashed public budgets, they basically became a pawn for the U.S., and large amounts of Ukrainian capital was just sucked out by Western monopolies. So, I mean, if you look at just there, the U.S. with even the small tiny bit of good you say they may have done, the real crime had already been imposed through the economic strangulation. And then in addition, then the using them to inflict as much damage against the Russians as possible.
Of course, that's true, but there's a certain point at which the actually people were getting paid. The government was functioning in a way, and got people who work for the government were continuing to get paychecks at U.S. largesse, and
Yeah.
that the population was kept in support of the Ukrainian effort, the rank and file Ukrainians, because their wherewithal was still maintained. You could see tape about Kiev. People were still going to discotheques and dancing and drinking and driving fancy cars and all that stuff. And some of that was just stolen U.S. money. Of course, it's true. I mean, the great example of what Dust is talking about, and people don't know this about U.S. foreign aid in general, is that it's not foreign aid directly to the country that is um, uh, supposed to go to. It's contracts to U.S. corporations to go in these countries and do jobs. I mean, we learned that with Halliburton in Iraq, and there were a number of exposés done on the work that Halliburton did, not only for Iraqi people, like building apartment buildings or schools or something, how shabby that was, but even for U.S. housing. I mean, I remember one tape where the housing built for the U.S. troops in Iraq was abominable. I mean, it was just like living in a tenement.
Oh, yeah. I've read stories about the
Yeah,
projects that
but
these.
that's all factual.
did.
Now, where the money goes, not to mention the fact that Zelensky on down, the oligarchs have stolen billions of dollars, and they even call them the Monaco
I don't know.
battalion, because
I think
these
my
billionaires live in Monaco.
I think my broader point was simply on like policy. Like, yes, they had to give money to certain things to help with their propaganda, but the reason why things were so bad in the first place was the imperialist system. So then the necessary policy wouldn't be, oh, we should be sending money that actually help the Ukrainians. We should be saying no, and the imperialist economic exploitation of the Ukrainians in the first place, and allowed them to have beneficial deals with Russia, and there wouldn't need to be any aid because there wouldn't be any that poverty and that need in the first place.
Yeah, but if you work for the electric company in Ukraine and you weren't getting paid, then they wouldn't have lights in Kiev to dance away the night. So these people were in necessary positions. Now, it served a propaganda purpose too, of course. But you're right about that. I mean, it's like the IMF, World Bank austerity programs, and their structural adjustment loans, where they go in and they say, we'll give you this money, but you have to create, like in Argentina, they did for centuries. Now they have a moron running their country. It's kind of interesting. But before we give you this money, you have to cut this private healthcare program you have. You have to alter it and make it more privatized. and or anything else. All the utilities. You have to privatize certain dimensions of it. So
Yeah.
utilities. So that yes, that goes on, and it certainly goes on in the arena we're talking about here. Um,
And
anyway, that's it.
definitely a proportion of the Ukrainian citizenry was supportive, right? They were wanted to be like the West. They wanted to be tight with the U.S. and with Europe, and they wanted to distance themselves from Russia. But like Dust pointed out, that wasn't definitely all Ukrainians, right? That was far too many Ukrainians had that desire. It's a foolish desire, and it was inculcated within them, through their own propaganda, through their own, um, you know, proximity to Western propaganda that pushes that stuff and says, "Hey, this is what you want. You want consumerism. You want privatize everything. The government's bad. That's what you want." And a lot of people, too many, were fooled into it, and that's why we say the foolish Ukrainians. But you're absolutely right, Dust. It's just a portion of the Ukrainians that were for that, which we're definitely foolish. But it doesn't it's not all Ukrainians, and they're kind of victims too. Just like the U.S. working class, we're kind of victims of this nonstop assault on our psychology, on our opinions, to get us to advocate things that are not in our interests. But that's definitely the big picture. We've got
Yeah, one
somebody
more
from
anecdote.
Siberia. Ben's in Siberia. He's just he's getting over his cold there. So we were hoping. Okay.
Anyway, one more anecdote.
Sorry. Yes. Okay.
The first time.
I wish I had a pen.
The first time Dmitry Yanukovych was elected president in 2004. At that time, I had a kind of a blog. It wasn't. I'm not sophisticated enough to know how to do a real blog, but I did a blog. And at that time, whoever I was doing it with, they sent me a list of countries that were predominantly listening to reading. It wasn't visual. Reading my blog, and always at the top was the United States, the United Kingdom, all the English-speaking countries, Australia, New Zealand, so on and so forth. Well, when Dmitry Yanukovych was elected the first time in 2004, there was a lot of talk about they wanted him out. They got him out in 2004 too, with the help of the U.S. That's the coup that's never mentioned. And so I started to get Ukrainians reading, and I don't know how many English-speaking Ukrainians there are reading my blog. It wasn't a great number, but it was in the hundreds every month, and it was number 2 to the United States suddenly, because I was saying the United States will fuck you over. They will fuck you every which way. They'll fuck every hole in your body. That's the U.S. They're not in there to help you. You might think that you want to have that kind of shit, that kind of all that material wealth. Well, they're not really going to give it to you. They're going to screw you. And so I was getting a lot of hostile feedback. You don't know anything about Ukraine, and we need this, and we trust the West, and all this crap. So so it got to the point where defending the first overthrow of Yanukovych was very enlightening for me, because these people, I guess, were just I weren't bots or anything, were just general responses, and they were idiotic when it came to U.S. foreign.
Yeah, I
they
mean,
didn't know shit, and as far as I was concerned, they were stupid. And so the people I was dealing with.
I deal with a lot of West African immigrants, and most of them love the U.S., are really pro-U.S. They're anti-China, anti-Russia. They're either Democrats or Republicans, either liberal thinking or conservative thinking, but they all blame their own country and their own government for the fact that their country isn't doing that well. And I mean, I guess there's some truth to that, to blaming an exploited population in a developing country that is being victimized by the ruling Western establishment to loot and suck all the resources out, all the wealth out, and they put in governments that will help facilitate that extraction. And it's unfortunate that so many people are blissfully ignorant of that reality and want to only blame their own people or their own governments. Unaware that, hey, if you ever had a government that actually fought and stood up for the interests of the people of your country, they would be probably assassinated or killed, or there would be a color revolution, just like there was multiple times in Ukraine and all around the world. But yeah, it's tough. A lot of the people that come here are ideologically predisposed to liking capitalism, ignoring the reality of imperialism, and thinking that we have something good here and we need to export it. Anyway, it's a big problem. It's a big problem, definitely. Dust appears to be doing some work.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Maybe I can expand on the point that I'm getting to with the difference between the imperialists and the people of all countries. I don't know. Maybe I'm coming from it. I'm both a communist, but also a Christian. And there's two issues. Like, I mean, you can't always trust what people say and why. You got to think about why they say it. That's what they've been told their whole lives. That's what the media tells them to say. That's what the media gets the government institutions to say. And the government institutions, where'd they get it from? Probably the CIA somewhere along the line. But if you look at the contradiction that they're in, they're workers. It's not in their material interest. And the other thing is that human beings develop. And I think what we should be trying to do is not condemn or write off any people. We should be trying or judge any people for what they're currently saying. We should understand why they're saying it, and then what we can do to change it, and what we can do to lift them up, what we can do to be in solidarity with them and their real interests. That's y'all go ahead.
Well, that's a perfect segue. I mean, that's where you and Billy Bob are in strict agreement. I mean, I think just basically, right, Billy Bob? I mean,
no, I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, it depends on who we're talking about. I mean, if we're talking about my coworkers who are championing the U.S. as a bastion of freedom and democracy, I mean, yeah, I don't want to write them off. I want to help them understand how that might not be true, right? I want to try and present reality in a persuasive way where they can see that there's definitely some criticism to be had about Western imperialism, and a little bit of sympathy maybe for their former country who is under is like a neo-imperialist colony kind of. But yeah, no, it's definitely, it needs to all be in from the approach of, how do I turn you into a comrade? How do I get you to be in solidarity with me against this tremendous evil of imperialism, which is the highest stage of capitalism. It's like the end stage of capitalism, where it's seeking to expand its markets globally, and it's using violence to do that. Yeah, I don't know if I wouldn't disagree with that.
No, I kind of lost my train of thought listening to you, but
I do that. Sorry,
but that's all right.
I've been frantically looking for a pin so I can write.
That's what I wanted to say. This is what I wanted to say. I was watching Napolitano, Judge Napolitano,
yeah,
and he had Douglas McGregor on it, and McGregor is very harsh on immigrants, very harsh on the immigration problem. And Napolitano, being a libertarian, he also is rather harsh. So he asked the question, Napolitano asked the question, how can we prevent these people from wanting to come to our country? So even, my second grader came at me, a third grader. Oh, I know. Stop fucking up their countries.
Yes.
Stop fucking them up, and let them have a piece of the pie, a piece of the action. Stop taking everything from them. Stop exploiting them. So I wrote to Judge Napolitano, and I said, look, I have an answer to your question. Have me on your podcast. I mean, for Christ's sake, it'll only take like 30 seconds at the most. maybe 10 seconds, because I have a simple answer for that. And I told him what my answer was, but I never heard back from him. But that's the answer, right? That is the answer.
And it makes me suspicious, right? It makes me suspicious of those guys who've been part of the establishment, and what from where are they coming now in their criticism? Is it really to make things better, or is it maybe just to better their own particular, wing of the establishment? But we got to use our own discernment, and we do. I appreciate Napolitano's show. I appreciate the guests he has on, and most of them I like what they're saying. Even McGregor, who, like you said, is pretty harsh and reactionary when it comes to immigrants and other minorities and things like that.
Yeah.
You guys still hear me?
Yeah. Can you pitch in?
I would have to say that, undocumented workers and immigrant workers and the masses of even, citizens who have Chicano background are probably the most exploited portion of the workforce in the United States. That is a major contradiction. You have these people, they may give some lip service to better policies on geopolitical. When they're attacking basically one of the major contradictions with the United States and viciously attacking the masses of Chicano and immigrant workers, they're no friend of the people. They're absolutely no friend of the people. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll use like what they're saying on geopolitics, what the people largely agree with, to get them to promote these figures who the ruling class uses as the main objective to reinforce anti-immigrant racism and stereotypes.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Which, go ahead, Billy Bob.
Well, do we cancel them?
Yes.
Or do we?
The Tucker Carlson, like some of these people are enemies.
Well, Douglas
like,
McGregor. Do we cancel Douglas McGregor?
I don't know, man. You can use them how you can use them, but you should be like, this fascist said this that I liked, but you still got to call him a fascist.
Sure. I mean, I think that's kind of what I just did a little bit. I called him reactionary. No, I agree.
I disagree with Jimmy Dore. When Jimmy Dore says, "Oh, I like Tucker Carlson on this, but we disagree on the immigrants," I don't disagree. That's a fundamental contradiction that I cannot stand what you want unless you change. Like that is, you know what I'm saying? That's a very core of who I am, of supporting the working class. And supporting the least amongst us and treating the least amongst us as God himself. It's that really bothers me. I try to be tactical about it, but then if I try to be tactical and try to use some of the good they got, all I end up doing is alienate myself from my real friends, which are the workers and the oppressed.
Yeah, I agree with Dust on that. I think it's, you have to speak to motive, why they have some motives that fundamentally we agree with, like McGregor on Ukraine. I mean, what does it take? I mean, all the guy is doing is taking what he knows about the military. He has no position in the military or influence directly with the military, so he can kind of speak the truth about what's going to go on with the war in Ukraine. And what those consequences are going to be, so that's not opposite of what his take on immigration is. He can. It's let me try something else. We recently discussed Norman Finkelstein's article. Now I have not read it, so I'm going to wing it here. But apparently went out of his comfort zone, which he speaks brilliantly about the situation in Palestine, Israel. He does, but he was talking about, as far as I understood, cultural issues, and he seemed to get them wrong as far as the young people we were talking with, and I would agree with the young people to given the positions I understood Finkelstein was taking. Rather than Finkelstein, they'll have a great deal of respect for his policy, his understanding of the situation in the Middle East and specifically Palestine and Israel. So that Finkelstein for me comes across as being kind of a heartfelt guy who misunderstands this wokeness. Like I tell the story of Regis Tremblay, another guest we've had on a number of times, when he came to the U.S. last time. It was his brother he met with. No, his son, and his son has spent many years in the U.S. military, and they were talking about the domestic situation here, which
The
we could begin
military
to
being
talk
really
about
unhappy
now.
with the woke agenda.
Yeah, that's right. He said, and there's going to be a civil war around the woke agenda. And I said to Regis, I said, that's idiotic. What, are the LGBT community going to take up arms? Have you ever gone to a gay guy's house for dinner and seen like 55 weapons in the living room? I haven't. Not here in Washington and Northern Virginia and Maryland. Once have I gone to a friend's house who's gay.
I don't want to stereotype gay people and say that they don't make good soldiers.
I know that. But they're not preparing for war.
Right.
They're already in a war. Okay.
Well,
they're in a war, and but the point I wanted to make was who was going to be this right-wing militia's enemy? Who are they going to have to attack? If it's going to be the U.S., it's going to be the deep state U.S. government, the one that the Dulles brothers, John Foster and Allen, the one that they brought into being. Those motherfuckers are going to be dead in 2 days. Not the deep state people, the militias. They're going to be dead maybe 3 days. I give them 2.5 days, and they're going to be dead. They're going to be wiped off the face of the earth.
The assertion is that the military is being divided between the woke and the anti-woke, and that's going to be the dividing line between the Civil War. But like you said, the woke agenda is coming from Langley. It's coming from FBI, and they're going to easily.
No, that's not what I'm saying. The woke agenda is not.
You guys hear
from
me?
The FBI.
You guys hear me?
Agenda originally as a weapon against LGBTQ country is coming from Dartmouth. It's coming from Steve Bannon. It's coming from all of these little enclaves of think tanks in Washington D.C. that think up this crap. I
thought that's what I said, but maybe not.
Can you guys hear me?
CIA has nothing to do with it.
Okay. I just want to stop and be like there. And I would just like to say, never use the phrase the woke agenda. There is no woke agenda. There is the manipulation of real issues that workers have to face. LGBT workers, oppressed nations, right. And all the identity issues that are real that go along with that. Those are real struggles. The liberals and the imperialists simply try to manipulate them to their benefit in whatever way possible. So when you have people, I don't know, I'll go back to Jimmy Dore. He's my punching bag right now. When he goes and I remember when he had Cornel West on, and he goes to Cornel West. Well, you want to appeal to, racial justice, or you want to appeal to class? And he goes, I need to do both. And I agree with him. He needs to do both, because Jimmy Dore's like, well, why don't you just vote for the Democrats? And the reason why Cornel West doesn't want to vote for the Democrats is because they're only manipulating the issue of national liberation and full human dignity and racial oppression. They're not actually addressing, they're only manipulating. We have to be on both the sides of the people, the oppressed people, and support all oppressed people and all marginalized people in a way that only socialism and the working class can bring about support. I said a lot. Y'all go back. Y'all go ahead.
That was great. Thank you. That was perfect.
I'm not sure how. I totally agree with that. And when I say the woke agenda, I mean I'm talking about the way that they manipulate real issues. I mean that's what that is to me. But if it's problematic to use that terminology, the woke agenda, I can explore that for sure. But I mean, that's what I'm describing is how they're manipulating real issues. But I mean, maybe you can explain further why that terminology is not, appropriate, because maybe a lot of people that use it, aren't as sensitive to the actual real issues that people have to face. And so, it's tough. It's complicated and it's messy and it's tough to know, but I totally am in 1000% agreement with you that we can't support the mistreatment of LGBTQ people or religious minorities, ethnic minorities. Like,
I got
nobody,
you. I know you're with us, but I think the reason why you repeat those words, and the reason why those are a part of our culture, the reason why beloved members of my own community say that bullshit is because it is a perfect manipulation. And that is what fascists like Tucker Carlson do. Maybe they'll say something good or here. They'll say something good about Ukraine or this or that. And then they use it. And then they use it. And then who are the enemies? It's not the imperialists. It's not the capitalists. Who is the enemies? It's the LGBT. It's the immigrants. That's the nature of fascism. It is to take legitimate economic concerns, to take falling economic conditions, etc., and anti-war sentiments, and then change the target from the people that are creating it to people who are already being oppressed worse in our society.
That's right. That's perfectly well put.
So the term woke agenda identifies the communities themselves as the enemy,
as the target. Exactly. The word woke itself. The word woke itself was a legitimate term coined by the African American or the Black community. That was a positive term. You go around people here and you say, I had someone tell me I was woke. A Black woman tell me I was woke is a compliment. Yeah. She identified that term with progress and being progressive and aware of oppression. Like, why are you gonna?
What about if I suggest that the word agenda suggests it's a top-down thing and it's really pointing at the enemy as being the puppeteers that are manipulating these real issues. So that's what I mean when I say woke agenda, and it's kind of suggests a top-down kind of thing as opposed to.
There's no need to put There's no need to put a negative connotation on the word woke.
Okay.
To begin with.
Okay. No. I'm trying to come to an understanding of what you're saying. So I see. So yeah, just using woke derogatorily kind of changes how it was originally purposed. The word that was originally purposed to created to convey.
Yeah. And that's the same with LGBT and agenda. The fascists do this constantly. They're referring to the manipulation of the liberals and the imperialists, but then they associate that oppression with the oppressed and marginalized community.
Yeah, well, and
so you just say the manipulation of our issues. You say our issues, meaning all people should be in solidarity with all people. Just say the manipulation of our issues. Or their
that's
lives,
good. I like that.
The
manipulation of our issues. I mean, that's what's happening. So no, I appreciate that.
Well, back in the day, another phrase that literally originated from Dartmouth, a kind of little think tank they have there that comes up with all these right-wing taglines, is political correctness. And they threw that out, and what it meant was if you were altruistic toward other people, you were being politically correct. If you had sensitivity to someone else's plight, you were simply being politically correct. So when they started to get called out about on the using that altruism was actually a good thing, which one might a decent human being might interpret that way, they started to attack the word altruism. And if you were altruistic, you were just you were kind of like weak, and people can be helped from a position of strength, and I want to help people from. It's all crap, and but it came literally out of from the right wing. It was a creation of the right wing. That whole movement. Even Bill Maher had a show called Politically Incorrect.
Yeah,
It's
he
where
was
a bunch
very
of
brave.
people
He was
who
very
didn't
brave.
go, who a bunch of people who didn't know anything came on his show and talked about things they didn't know anything about. It was a fascinating show to watch. What? Huh? So anyway,
In my younger years, I enjoyed it. I saw a few. They would have the liberals on, and then they would make fun of the conservatives. But yeah, I grew out of it, and now I see Bill Maher in a completely different light. Completely different light. But no, I appreciate that we're having some good discussion. I think I appreciate the corrections and the points that Dust is making. I don't take issue with them. And no, it's something to definitely consider. Just it's kind of a little bit thoughtless. It's a little bit thoughtless. Engaging in the paradigms of the woke agenda. You're right. It's talking about it more as a manipulation of our issues. I think is a more appropriate way to discuss those issues. I can get on board with that.
yeah.
Right on.
So there's what do you want to? You want to talk about the I don't know what the elephant in the room or whatever.
Okay.
Is there any way to talk about Guani and the referendum in Venezuela? Maybe I could give a short few sentences and we could
Sure.
respond.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so on Sunday, yesterday, there was a referendum in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and they voted in a 95 percentile across the country that most of a large portion of the territory of Guyana was never settled, was always part of Venezuela, and if necessary, they would adopt it as a state. And the U.S. media has taken this that they're going to invade soon, which is completely absurd, and they're using this to drum up the war drums against the Venezuelan people. And I think we should be cautious of this. And I've seen a lot of the same rhetoric. I saw one right winger say, "Oh, this is a big country going to invade a small country," and the reality is, if Venezuela would ever do anything, which I don't think they're going to do whatsoever, if they were going to do something, it would be out of defense against U.S.-funded death squads on their border, which the U.S. has a habit of doing, like they do in Ukraine against the genocide against Russian speakers there. But I think they're drumming up the propaganda against Venezuela, and we should be ready to defend Venezuelan democracy, which even former President Carter says was exemplary. Their democratic processes, especially in comparison to the West. I think we should be able to speak against the propaganda and support Venezuela. I think maybe if I can bring it home to North Carolina. In North Carolina, we have gerrymandering. And the majority of black voters vote for Democrats. I'm not a big fan of the Democrats, but that's what they do. And the majority of people in North Carolina are Democratic voters, even though this is largely a red set, the majority of the people. But because of the way they draw up the districts, 60 to 80% huge majorities in the state assemblies, because they take away the power of black voters almost entirely. And even in Graham, North Carolina, in the 2020 election, they pepper sprayed black voters as they were marching to the polls. And this is supposed to be a democracy. And in Venezuela, not only they don't have token black, brown, and indigenous people. They have black, brown, and indigenous people in power carrying out policies that benefit their communities. Millions of houses have been built, schools, education at any level is free. I had a comrade visit there, and there was a program at the workplace where nursing mothers could get 2 hours off of work to nurse their children. Like, the progress they've made in Venezuela is amazing, and I think we as human beings and socialists should defend it and speak up against the lies against it.
Definitely. Well, very well said, Dust. Venezuela is a great thing because they came to power peacefully, right? They were able to use the democratic process, even though the U.S. tried to do a coup, tried to force Chavez out of power. It didn't succeed, and so they didn't have to have a bloody revolution. Nevertheless, the West reacted the exact same way they always do when actual democracy takes root. And they tried to destroy that society. They tried to choke that society, strangle that society economically, and make everybody poor to force regime change so they could get their cronies back in power to start continue again extracting all the wealth out of that country. And that's what they've been doing with, they did the same thing with the Soviet Union. They did it with China for 20 years. The first 20 years from 1949 to 1973. That's more than 20 years. Cuba, they continue to do it to Cuba, just strangle, because they have a government in power of, for, and by the people that's not going to allow the West just to take all the wealth. And so they oppose those governments. And the people of Guyana, I think, are by and large opposed to Western imperialism. They're pretty woke in the good way. There's only a good way. There's only a good way to be woke. But the people of Guyana are pretty fucking woke. And it's not going to be easy for the United States to put in their military base and to take over that energy, which was recently discovered there and causing a problem. And that's why you're seeing it in the news, because guess what? There's some resources there. There's some wealth there. So all of a sudden, it's in the news. That's weird, right? The U.S. is interested in getting their fucking beak in that shit. Okay. Carlos seemed to think there was an elephant in the room. I'm very excited because I didn't know there was an elephant.
Well, I want to say a couple of things first. Also, let's move to Africa. Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have formed a federation, a loose federation. ECOWAS was threatening, through basically Nigeria, was threatening to go into let me see, it was Niger. And they haven't done it. But Tinubu, contrary to a guest we've had on the show, has not done very well with the Nigerian economy. And there's pressure on him, and I'm sure a lot of it's coming from Langley and the U.S. State Department to change the situation. I mean, talk about resources. Now uranium in that region, and cobalt, and all the natural resources in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali are up for grabs as far as the U.S. is concerned, and they'd like to use a proxy. So I think that might be an element behind those three countries, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, forming this federation. I just wanted to throw that out internationally.
Yeah, I read that. Ben's excellent weekly summary introduced that to me. I didn't know about that loose confederation, and they're going to be pro-Russia, pro-China. They're articulating, hey, we're done with Western imperialism, and we're going to lean towards these two anti-hegemonic countries. And I mean, that's the best thing they could do. I mean, the entire world needs to do that. So they're at the cutting edge of anti-imperialism, and it's really exciting. It's really great news. But that wasn't the.
No, the elephant in the room is Trump, of course.
Okay. He is. He is always omnipresent until he's dead, and so I wonder what they're going to do, because
that'd be a good step.
They really don't want another. They don't want another. 4 years of Trump. Maybe they're gonna change their mind on that. Maybe things are so out of control, they're gonna try and put him in power, and then they're gonna try and force him to do some things, and then blame him when they don't go well. Maybe, I don't know.
What? No, I mean, I think Trump's administration wasn't fascist because they're not the imperialists understand that fascism is weak and it's a last reaction. It is them trying to claw their way out of a crisis. We haven't really created a crisis as socialists internally. Like, you think the left in the United States is ready for a socialist revolution? We're nowhere close to it. We fight like dogs. We don't build power. We're not connected to the masses. We got to change that. So I don't think, but I do think Trump is personally a fascist. And what I mean by that is he has a brutal hatred that he's vocal about towards the immigrant people, towards Chicanos, towards black people. If you look at he wanted to hang I think the central five.
Yeah.
He said he went against Obama for not having a birth certificate. This blatant open.
Can I challenge you a little bit?
Sure.
You know what? So there's two things, right? It's the things he says, and then it's what goes on in his mind. And I'm not sure what goes on in his mind is any different at all than what goes on in the mind of Biden and all the rest of those fucks. But definitely the things he says is different, right? He goes about saying things in a different way. Do you think that maybe the things he says are done out of a political calculation? And
I think the people who supporting him
himself.
Yeah. I think the people supporting him and put him in the power and used him definitely know the implications of what he's saying and are happy that he's saying it.
Well, he says a lot of things like, I'm not a racist. He invites the black people into his office. He's not an overt racist, right? He's not an overt racist.
I would say he is. I mean, he can't be open. Yeah. I mean, he's not David. He's not like openly Klan member. Right. He's your conservative overt racist. Like you're small, like you're, I mean, he's like Tea Party. He's borderline like Tea Party racist, where they say it's not about race, but the immigrants are the problem with the country, which is definitely a racial group. If we look at undocumented labor,
that's political. Like that's a political calculation, because he employs a lot of these people.
I don't know if it's from Trump, but it's certainly from the people who supported him.
He doesn't.
When Hillary Clinton
top dollar to white people.
When Hillary Clinton was funding Trump and supporting Trump as a candidate, that she thought she didn't care that he was racist, but she did say, well, maybe I can beat him because he's overtly racist. And then she didn't mind if she actually lost to him. And then the Democrats have continually been supporting the Trump aligned people, and they don't care if they actually lose. If they win, it helps them in the next election. And it makes it where they have something to be against instead of being for, and it can fear people into continue to support the imperialist duopoly. So it's just two arms of the same beast. And they're going to need more diverse tactics as the crisis, as further crises happen. They can't stick to the mild rhetoric. They need fake, controlled opposition in order to do that. And Trump was very good at that. And if he actually does anything they don't want for his selfish interest, they can take him out of power. That is what it is. It doesn't mean if he was to get in the back in the power, if maybe he's out of graces with a large portion of the establishment now, doesn't mean if we should cheer for him to get back in the power. And it doesn't mean we should be tailing the people who are being manipulated to think that would be a good idea. No, we need to go to the masses of people who don't see any positive thing within duopoly, who think Trump is some kind of outsider, and be like, yeah, he's a fascist. The power was in the people. We need to work with the immigrants. We need to work with the masses of black incarcerated people, and we need to have the working class combined together against the real target, the monopoly capitalist, which Trump is still essentially working for.
Well, you don't want to confuse Trump the man with Trump, whatever his position is within the political culture. And I think at heart, he's obviously a huge egoist. And if you stroke his ego, you can influence him one way or another. I think though, like a lot of egoists, when he begins to reflect on what you said, he can make distinctions between people who are flattering him just to flatter him, and people who are giving him advice that may enhance his whatever it is, historical rep, whatever he admires about powerful people, what history's going to think of them, how we can wield power, and that sort of thing. So when you take that guy personally, there's several stories. We already have a record of him when he was in office for 4 years, and you can go back to to when his father had all those housing projects and used to, have African Americans living in slums and doing no repairs, and how racist his father was, and if he absorbed any of that, or whether he absorbed any compassion for those people being treated like that when he was confronted with those situations. There's no sign there was any compassion. But you take his tenure in office, he put people on the Supreme Court who did away with the Voting Rights Act, for Christ's sake. Oh my God! We had a friend. He's passed away, Bill Clark, and he was the first black anchor man in Cleveland, and he was a jazz aficionado, and had a number of positions on jazz radio stations here with jazz programs in D.C. And we were sitting around having dinner one night, a bunch of us, and we were talking about Lyndon Johnson and the war in Vietnam, because we were all old Vietnam War people, older guys. And Bill jumped in. He said, "But man, when Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, I was so shocked. That was so consequential. So, and I, being the cynic I am, I said, yeah, that's because he wanted more bloods in Vietnam. He wanted African Americans to think that they too had a stake in the culture, so he could get these draft age African American kids in Vietnam. So, Bill and I we stayed friends, but it's sort of like I shot it down, and maybe I'm wrong about that. I can't really substantiate it. But the Voting Rights Act was central to African Americans being voted, and as Duss pointed out, there were many things that went on during the election of Trump that were racist. Gerrymandering, which has historical roots in North Carolina, he's talking about, but all kinds of things. Laws were passed where you were forbidden to bring water or food to people standing in line for hours to vote. And this is after, in African American neighborhoods, they closed down all the voting booths.
Yeah, no, these are all policies and practices that have gone on for a long time. I mean, since the founding of our country, really, the disenfranchisement of people of color.
But even if you remove the angle used by the liberal press, when Trump did it, when it was done under Trump, it was done to a much greater degree than before. And one of the men behind Trump, he's not one of the billionaires, but he's very influential, is Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon has declared over and over again that what he wants is a white Christian nation. Now, the two adjectives there are very troubling: white and Christian. So I think Trump is more malleable enough to see that as a way to power, and I think that's an element within Trump personally that Duss correctly describes as fascist.
So
fascist leanings.
I think these guys aren't really motivated by their racism, right? I think they're motivated for their desire for power, and I think their desire for power informs their opinions and their politics. I mean, of course, they are racist in the way that all of the ruling class.
That's near the definition of fascism: is power for power. Power for power.
What I'm saying is that's no different.
So they'll do anything They'll
There's-
appeal to the worst elements. Their major thing is power, but they'll appeal to the worst sentiments within the population to get the power, and they're
No,
willing
for
to
sure.
do that.
For
Yeah.
sure. I mean, within limits, obviously, because again, they're not overt racists, and there's not enough racists in this country for overt racism to poll well or to win an election. Believe me, if they thought they could say the N-word over and over and over and that's get them elected, they would freaking do it. But we know
Who'd get a vote?
we know from
I mean,
whatever that guy, Lee Atwater.
slightly
Lee Atwater
veiled
explained-
racism. Yeah,
Lee Atwater
slightly veiled
explained, like, in
racism is still racism. When they say thugs, when they say immigrant in that negative connotation, when he openly said a law and order and what that means. Well, who they look is the criminal, as the people committing the crimes. They say it's the poor people, it's the black people. Like, I mean, this is still racism, and he applied to those things and used a lot of those dog whistles, a lot more than his equally disgusting liberal counterparts, who were a little bit more veiled and arguably more effective at building racist institutions than Trump was. But I think
let me
just like
let me quote
party
from Lee Atwater, because it's gonna support your point. So this is what I'm saying. This is a 1981 interview with Lee Atwater. You start out in 1954 by saying the N-word over and over. By 1968, you can't say that. That hurts you. It backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff, and you're getting so abstract. Now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. We want to cut this is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than saying the N-word over and over. So that's exactly right. Dust, what you're saying is, you can't just be an outright overt racist anymore and still be politically viable. So even though I think they're
Trump's
all racist,
pretty close. Trump, and it's pretty easy to understand. Like like the absolute vast majority of oppressed people came out in mass to vote against
denying
Trump.
it. Like, he's not close enough that he's embracing it overtly.
No, but
He's
it's pretty
denying it
obvious to the
overtly.
people who are going to be the target. It's pretty close to the people who are going to be the target. Of it. If you I mean, they came out. People came out in record numbers to vote for Biden, and Biden's an open racist.
Yeah.
Biden was for segregation. I mean, so masses of oppressed people came out to vote for a segregationist because they realized how bad his dog whistles were. Like, they were unprecedented. And
So I don't think
the
their
power.
hearts
And he
are
enabled
different.
and he enabled fascists. If you look at Spike Lee's movie, Black Klansman, at the end of the movie, it shows Charlottesville, where our comrade in the IWW, Heather Heyer, was murdered by a fascist, and Trump said there's good people on both sides. I mean, that is an unprecedented dog whistle and enabling of fascist forces.
Okay.
And I don't think, if it wasn't for the Trump presidency, I don't think the fascist forces would have grown, how they've grown in that time period. And I think our comrade Heather Heyer would still be with us today if it wasn't for the Trump presidency.
So
And
it's true. I work with not work with them, but I've had a long history with the Southern Poverty Law Center, and these people have free reign, and they're out and out open racists. And Trump would never stand up. But the point that Dust was making, Biden bragged about instituting stricter laws, which mostly affected black youths and sent many of them to prison for long terms. And he bragged about being the leader in Congress to pass this laws and law and order law. So yes, he's two-faced too. So, but there's something obviously you can see a qualitative difference between Trump and racism and Biden and racism. So that what you're talking about, Billy Bob, primarily would apply to Biden, whereas Trump has gone to a different level. When you talked about Oh, now his name went. The guy, Lee Atwater. We used to have a restaurant in Northern Virginia, and it was based on blues. And he was a great lover of African American music, specifically the blues. Then he played blues guitar with other African Americans. Yet at the same time, he was shafting them. How, really destroying communities. How, what was the guy? The guy, what was the name of the guy that was used as a prison thing?
Willie Horton.
Willie Horton ads. Those were Lee Atwater. Total racist ads. So these are kind of complex issues when you get down to the personality involved.
When he was dying, he said he regretted it.
Yeah, when he was dying, he said he regretted it. But I would put Lee Atwater to the left of Trump, because Trump is an egoist that would never make those admissions. It wouldn't occur to him to do that.
A couple specific things were brought up, which I have an opinion about. So, let's talk about there are good people on both sides. Because I saw that as the media deliberately misrepresenting what Trump was saying. So that's not Trump being a racist. That's the media deliberately misrepresenting what Trump is saying.
He knew there was Nazis on the other side. Why would he say that?
Well, he was talking about the toppling of historic statues issue. So there's good people that think that we shouldn't necessarily take over Stonewall Jackson's statue, right? Where does it end? Are we gonna overthrow Jefferson and Washington too because they had slaves? Like, there's good people that believe. Wasn't it a Robert E. Lee statue that was in debate? And Charles, I could be wrong. I'm not sure. Well, what I'm saying is the both sides that Trump was referring to was people that think
but it was a Confederate statue.
Yeah. Well, Stonewall Jackson was a Confederate, and I said Stonewall Jackson. It might have been Robert E. Lee only.
My bad. So you're correct, but it was a Confederate statue.
Right. Are there good people that think that we shouldn't topple Confederate statues? Or is it everybody that think we should topple Confederate statues?
They're racist. They believe racist. I'm not saying they're irredeemable, but they do support a statue put up by the Daughters of the Confederacy that was solely put up for the purpose of intimidating black people after civil rights victories.
Well,
so they're at least ignorant and okay with racism and wanting to at least virtue signal towards racism.
Should we overthrow the statues of slave owners? If you've owned slaves, should you not have any statues? Or is it only if you fought in the Confederacy? So it just seems like
wait a minute.
I would like to see statues of John Brown, Robert F. Williams in North Carolina. I'd like to see those kind of, and I think we should take down all the Confederate statues.
You're giving Trump too much
especially
credit.
Time they were put up.
He didn't know anything about history.
No.
He wasn't.
That's true.
That's what his comment.
He was given that argument.
So
he was given that argument by Bannon. Bannon said, "I would guarantee you." I don't know this for a fact.
No.
Or Bannon or Steve Miller, somebody like that.
So this is the thing. So the media.
Lee Atwater, you could talk Steve Miller, because here's a Jewish guy who's still working for Trump, who would have the Jews slaughtered in a heartbeat if that would enhance his career at the moment, if he thought that. But don't give Trump any credit for coming up with the statue thing.
That was the context in which he said there's good people on both sides. He was not specifically talking about neo-Nazis because
he didn't mean it. It was
a couple sentences later, he actually expressly condemned neo-Nazis and white supremacists. And people like Jake Tapper have acknowledged that, not fans of Trump. So again, that's just a deliberate media spin trying to paint him in the worst possible light and being dishonest to do it. It's not.
I think Carlo actually was getting to something of a deeper meaning than me or you we're speaking on. And even if he's personally ignorant, he is being influenced by these fascists, like Bannon, and he's being used by the monopoly class as controlled opposition. and he's on point with that brand, and the people of and the masses of oppressed people and working people are largely recognize it. I mean, if you look at the only reason why rural white voters have as much say in the federal elections is because of inherently racist policies, like the Electoral College
Yeah.
and anti-popular places. I mean, the majority of people in the United States vote Democrat, but you still have Trump, you still have Republicans who get in the office because of the Electoral College.
No, and
And
that's the way
because
the ruling establishment likes it, right? They don't want one powerful party. That's too hard to maintain. You got to have two sides, and they can play both sides. But I think, even
yeah,
though
it's a
Trump
lot
has
easy to manipulate rural areas with less people than it is the more urban areas with the and the more oppressed regions like the Black Belt and the Southwest, who have long-standing civil rights and resistance within their culture. It's very easy to manipulate the demographic, the older, whiter, more middle class, which is the Republicans. That's to say they're not manipulating real things; they're falling, but it's more financially easy to manipulate those groups. But I would like to reach out to those groups, but I don't think we need Trump to do it. I don't think there's no reason to call Trump. There's no reason to say Trump is legitimately. There's no proof, and there's no reason organizing why to say that Trump is anti-establishment, because he's not. How is an egotist? It will always be a tool. He'll never represent the people. Why is there a need to go along with this?
I think he represents and illustrates a tremendous headache for the ruling establishment, and because he doesn't put the class interest first, he puts his own interest first. And I think for that reason they don't want him in power, because they are going to struggle to control and contain him, and he's going to give them a lot of headaches.
Okay,
and when they have a puppet.
I got you.
So,
when the dog bites a friend's child, they're going to slap it on the wrist, but it's still going to be ready to bite the neighbor's child or someone they like, or the so-called invader. It's still going to bite them. It's still their tool, even if they want to slap him right now. He's always a tool. How is he ever not going to be a tool?
Well, I mean, he's not as good of a tool, and it could be a dangerous tool. So for that reason, they don't want him, and that's why
it's a dog. Really, you think Trump really has enough power to be a danger to the establishment?
Well, we already saw how he's been a danger.
No, I mean, do you think January 6th actually had a chance? And if January 6th would have happened, would it have been good? I don't think. First of all, I don't think it had a chance. Number one.
I don't know why we're talking about January 6th. I never.
But you know what I'm saying? Where's his danger? Where's his danger?
So.
What is his danger? How is he dangerous? He's completely controlled opposition. He is no danger. They're scared. I mean, they are scared of the masses of people. But the thing is, Trump supporters are a small minority in the population. Even in the rural areas where 60 to 80% of the people voted for him, the majority of the people didn't vote. Trump supporters are a very small portion of the population. We're not going to build any power by appealing. And when you appeal to, when you say that Trump voters are this, I mean, you don't agree with MAGA communism, which is this absurd internet belief that the MAGA movement is the most revolutionary portion of the U.S. workers, which is some weird trolly internet thing used to get views. But I don't see how what you're saying is any different. That.
Well, I mean, two things. You asked me how Trump is
organizing the press, the working class, and those are the least to gain. And they hate Trump, and they rightfully hate Trump. All so right. Why the fuck support Trump whatsoever?
And there's a separation we have to acknowledge here, and we have to separate the political from the economic. So what Trump do revolutionary? Would he give the biggest tax break in the history of the world to the wealthy again, like he did in his first term as president? Would he come? Yes, that's exactly what he would do. But within the first couple of months, he became he became president again, he would give another huge tax break to the wealthiest people in this country. And it would be enormous.
Yeah.
And
So
that's-
I
that's
said a
the
lot. I'd like
economic
to get
dimension.
Billy's response.
But that,
I said
and
a
you
lot.
won't
I
get
said a lot.
anybody. You won't even get CNN or CNBC or whatever you call that fucker. You won't even get them talking about it because they're part of that. They just benefited from that. They just got a huge raise because of that. So you've got that economic dimension where there is no division between Trump and any other wealthy people. They're all they all
and I
have
wouldn't
these.
say that
these-
that area is where Trump represents a threat. I would
The political
make that
part is
argument.
manipulated. It's manipulable, and that's the arena.
Okay, so how does Trump represent a threat exactly?
Well, so
What power? Go ahead.
So yeah, number one, I would say that there's several areas where he represents a threat just because he doesn't have the class interest at heart, and because he's an egoist. He wants to make himself look good.
What
He
power
wants to
does
be
he have to challenge that? Even if his interests are slightly not aligned, what power does he actually have to be a
he
threat?
would be the president of the United States, right? So that in itself,
I don't think he's not going to be president.
You have a megaphone,
and nor should we support him being president.
Well, no, you're asking how would President Trump be a threat, and I was trying to explain how he could be a threat. And
couldn't the working
another point too I
couldn't
wanted
the
to make.
ruling if he's only concerned about his ego,
Yeah.
the second he actually gets into power, don't you think that he could easily be manipulated as he was the last time he was in power?
Of course, but I mean, I'm trying to explain to you why we see this nonstop assault against him. Why during his presidency you had hoax after
Because
hoax,
it makes
like
him look good. Because the masses of people hate Trump. And if you attack Trump, you're able to not do anything, keep robbing the people, and still get elected because you'll be like, oh, if you don't elect us, actual fascism is going to happen. Like that's manipulation. That's why they're doing it. That's why they're attacking them. That's why they're making a show of it. It's not an actual threat.
That is the definite tone on the liberal media, CNN, for example, which I'm forced to watch because of a lack of other things. Basic my health condition, but yes, that is fear Trump. Fascism is on its way. He's already threatening people that have
But you guys are saying that's true. You're saying
that
that's
it is somewhat. He's personally a fascist,
and it's true. It's
yes,
other.
it's both. If you,
both.
it's just like the LGBT issue. There
So
is
it's not
real.
manipulation. It's
There is
honest reporting.
no. Listen,
CNN is just giving you the
it's
straight
both.
dirt.
It's both. It's like just like LGBTQ people are marginalized and have been marginalized and have been kept out of jobs. That is true. But
Yes.
when the Democrats say I'm for LGBTQ, and then they enact policies that destroy entire working class communities, including the LGBT amongst them, and they don't do anything to put in the law or actually fight for LGBT people, there's the manipulation. So with Trump, yeah, he is personally a fascist. Yes, he says all this stuff, but I don't think there's any real danger of him coming to power and acting fashion, because that's not what they want right now.
Okay, so
But they're able to
say
use
something
both.
because I
You know what
just
I'm trying to
remembered
say?
my thought about
They're able to
communism.
manipulate.
So I'm gonna keep
They're able to
talking until
manipulate
you stop talking, because
anti-racism.
I'm going to forget my thought if
All
I
right,
start.
go ahead.
listening to you.
Go ahead. My bad. Go ahead.
So no,
Go ahead.
MAGA communism. So I would consider myself a MAGA communist because I consider MAGA communism communists reaching out to Trump supporters and trying to explain to them the reality of what's going on.
That would make me a MAGA communist, and I'm not a MAGA.
You got to stop interrupting.
All
So
right, go
what
ahead.
I'm saying is I would never vote for Trump personally. So if that excludes me from your definition of MAGA communism, fine. I would never vote for anyone in this rigged system, because that would be I would be supporting this system, which I think is not a democratic system.
But why? Okay.
So as far as I'm concerned, I embrace those who embrace MAGA communism because I am for reaching out to working class people that identify as Trump supporters and who hate the establishment, that have turned to Trump.
I am too.
Because of his anti-establishment rhetoric, which has been
Here-
over the top. And we want to hear it from somebody. We want to hear it from somebody powerful. It's nice to hear Trump say it. It's
All
nice
right.
to have,
Here's my question. Here's
all
my
right, I'll let you
question.
interrupt me now.
All right. Do you think that Trump supporters are more revolutionary than the masses of people who support Democrats?
More revolutionary in the way that we're going to actually have a revolution. I mean, you know, I'm just.
How does
talking
an
about
actual
progress.
revolution take place?
We're so far from there, Dust. We're so
It
far
takes
from
the
there.
okay. Listen,
Do we reach out to these people or not? I'm saying
yes,
we
I
fucking
think
reach
we
out to
should
them.
reach to them. I think
Yeah.
we should reach out.
So
to
there's
them.
no problem.
But
There's no
but
problem.
how are you reaching out to them? You're by going to them and saying, "Hey, you're right. Trump is actually an anti-establishment figure." That's how you want to plan to reach out to those people.
I perceive Trump to be an anti-establishment because of
Okay.
his
So what do you
anti-establishment
do?
rhetoric, because of the establishment's
Okay.
response to
So-
his rhetoric with the hoaxes and the lawfare. I mean, all that stuff suggests
so
to me
first
that
of
they don't
all-
want him in power and he's anti-establishment.
Okay. So first of all, I think you're
Yeah.
believing a lie.
Okay.
That's the first part. And
Yes.
next of all, what you say strategically? How do revolutions happen? How does the working class come to power? It is from the most exploited. It is from the contradictions of class and
Yeah.
national oppression
And
that you make
historically,
this
it's
space.
been in the
So
most
what
impoverished
happens?
and
So listen,
underdeveloped societies.
what's going to happen when you as a communist go out to you? First of all, you're putting Trump supporters above the other people. You're saying you're specifically focusing on them. I don't know why you're doing that to begin
Who
with.
said that? Who said that?
Okay,
Gus?
okay, but
a straw man.
that's what most MAGA communists. I think that's the distinguishing definition between my definition of MAGA the
No,
specific
I mean that's
MAGA
fine. I can't
communists
speak to other people, but
focused.
I haven't heard that. I would disagree with that.
MAGA communists believe that the MAGA people are more revolutionary than other portions of society. And
Well,
and
they're
the
more
thing is, and first of all,
anti-establishment.
okay, so I don't think they are.
Okay.
I really don't think they are, because their hatred towards immigrants makes
why
them in
Trump
line
has so
with
much
the
support.
establishment. Their hatred towards immigrants makes them in line with the establishment. And what happens when you repeat the lie that he's genuine an anti-establishment threat? When you repeat that lie, what's going to happen? The people that we most need for the revolution, the most exploited people, are going to rightfully hate you and think you're a dumbass for believing the lies that this dude who calls them dogs and rapists and murderers is somehow with you, because he knows they hate him. They know they're hated and they're not going down with that shit. Why the fuck are you going to alienate yourself from the mass? Even if you think the masses of people are wrong, just tactically, why the hell are you going to go out and identify with Trump like that and alienate yourself from the most exploited people in the United States?
Yeah, but Dust, the polls are showing that 22% of African Americans and a higher percentage of Latino or Hispanic, whatever you want to call them, Americans support Trump.
Yes, so 80% don't.
Yeah, I know.
That's
but
the vast
those
majority.
numbers are higher, and they kind of they're higher than they've ever been historically. So
if yes, people are losing faith in the parties. More people more oppressed people supported a Republican than before, but it's a raise between 1 or 2%. The vast majority of oppressed people still correctly see Trump as a disgusting racist enemy. The only thing is that the people, the oppressed people who supported Trump were like, majority of them were like, okay, he's racist, but maybe they believe the lies about him being anti-establishment, so they're willing to go along with it. They're still recognizing his racism.
He regulated a lot of things.
Yeah.
That was one of the things.
But he's vastly hated. Trump is rightfully and correctly hated by the vast majority. Yeah.
That's why, in essence, he lost the last election.
Yeah.
Because people were, not only did they hate him, but they were frightened by him. It raises the question of whether Mussolini was a revolutionary. Was that a revolution around Mussolini? Is that what you want?
The fascists are revolution. Well, you can have You can have a counter revolution if it's a legitimate change in society in the backwards. Usually,
Yeah.
revolutionary has a good connotation, but you can have negative,
Well, just discussing
disgusting,
Trump,
fascist. Yeah,
just discussing Trump has made me nauseous.
yeah.
So
Me too.
I
I
don't
think
know.
I think
Okay.
the bigger point is, where does the manipulation end and the truth begin?
Yeah.
You see where I'm getting with this? Do you think that the masses of people who came out to vote for a racist Biden were being manipulated against a legitimately anti-establishment candidate, or they rightfully saw a disgusting racist? And the answer is, I think that the people are smart. I have
Well,
faith
I
in the
think
masses of people to an extent.
I agree with you there. I think Biden got the vote because or the votes he got because there were just a lot of people that didn't want Trump.
And I see a
Legitimately
lot of,
feared him.
yeah.
I mean,
I see a lot of in
you
a lot
fear
of these people. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say a lot of these people who are like pro unity. They're like, oh, we gotta reach out to the rural white conservative workers. We gotta reach out to them. We gotta reach out to them. Okay, a lot of these same people who say Trump is legitimately anti-establishment will attack people like Garvey and Malcolm X and hardcore nationalists as being tools of the system. But Trump isn't a tool of the system. Like this is hypocrisy. It's like, who are you saying is a tool and who you're not saying a tool? And I would say Trump is a tool, and the oppressed nationalists were not tools.
I think people might have a different perspective on Garvey if he was, came close to being president or was president. Like I think they would maybe be more, apologetic for him, but he was just an activist and he was kind of steering people, away from, working class unity.
No, I don't think that. No, I don't think that for a minute.
Across racial lines.
I got you. Maybe he was used to an extent for that purpose. Maybe he would,
Yeah.
but I think Garvey is an amazing, heroic figure that changed the consciousness of masses of people in an unreversible way. Like Garvey's organization had deep roots in the community, and it was Malcolm X's parents were Garveyites. Like, regardless if he was a capitalist, regardless if he supported fascists later in his life, just him standing up and giving dignity to people who never had dignity had lasting effects. And not only that, he was able to, this is where I think I prefer Stalin to Lenin. And a lot of you are like, why is that? And it's because Stalin got people to do things and led the leadership. And I think Garvey, on an ideological level, regardless of any disregard I have with him, on empowering oppressed people, he did far more empower the oppressed than any amount of dividing.
I am not going to argue with that. I'm definitely no Garvey expert. I would want to hear, if somebody disagrees, I would want to hear him out and see if it is compelling or not. I think that there is room for solidarity among people who think Trump is genuinely anti-establishment and people who don't think he is. I don't think that should be a division line between the left.
I'm here talking to you, ain't I?
Right, right. So I appreciate that, Dust, and that is an interesting, it's an interesting disagreement, and you've articulated your case how he is not, and I definitely you have some valid points. I think there's a good reasons why he can be considered as anti-establishment, and why him being president would be a problem for the empire and would cause headaches that they don't want to have to deal with, and would ultimately weaken Western imperialism. Now, I think that's true. I'm not that invested in that belief that I'm going to vote for him, because I could never endorse any. My vote is too pure and too precious. I will vote for myself and myself only. That's a joke. But no, I wouldn't vote. I'm not going to vote for anybody like that. I'm not going to, endorse them. But if he wins, I think it would be, a bad situation, the worst possible situation for the ruling establishment, and that's why they're trying to avoid it. If they get in any of these other clowns, they're way happier, and that's obvious. That's fucking obvious. All these clowns, DeSantis, what are that? Nimrata, what's her name? Nikki Haley.
Yeah, they're horrible fascists.
They're awful, and so that's who they want. They don't want to deal with the headache that Trump would be giving them, like he gave them in his first 4 years. But I enjoy the discussion. I'm glad somebody saw the elephant in the room. I almost overlooked it. So thank you, Carlo, for that. But we have been going an hour and 40 minutes. You guys want the last word?
Go ahead.
I thank you so much for inviting me on and being willing to have this discussion. I don't think I don't know. I tried to. I didn't really hear anything more than what I've already heard. But I think
You're
we're
not
both
persuaded.
against. Yeah. But I think we're both against the empire and the system as it is. We should work against that. But the second that you're willing to go along with these people to the point that you attack people that I consider to be the most exploited, then it's over. Like if I see straight up attacks,
Yeah.
How long are you willing to, like, I just keep your principles. If you're going to say, okay, he's a legitimate anti-establishment figure, I'd be glad, but I'm not willing to vote for him. Okay, cool. That's a disagreement. But it's like, oh, okay, I got to get him in the office. I got to do this. I got to tell this person to shut up. Like, just don't take it too far. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I don't know anybody that, is, believes that, the marginalized people ought to be further oppressed, or that their marginalization is good. And we have to support that. Like, that's not communism. If anybody, espouses those views, they're not communists. So I think, it ought to be just a given understanding that, people who are communists, socialists on the left, don't engage in that kind of thinking. That means you're not a communist, but that's the definition, actually. I would say, depending on how you want to define things, but no, I get it. And maybe if I looked really hard, I could see where that would be a concern. But to me, that's not even a concern, because I don't see it happening. That's certainly not what I'm doing. It's not what people that I follow are doing, that are, like Midwestern Marks, for instance, and the great guys that we had on a week ago. Like, that's the farthest thing from what they're doing. And so, even the implication that you bring out is a little bit offensive, Dust. It's a little bit offensive that you would even suggest that,
Okay.
I hope you understand that. And take it in a good way.
I support Midwestern Marks. I watch their streams. I have a disagreement with them on the country singer who I saw as a tool that was used to manipulate people towards reactionary, racistly inherent policies by the establishment. And they loved him and thought he was the best that ever happened. Probably because they don't actually listen to class conscious country like I do all day. But but they're still comrades. They say they have the same stuff and they're working towards it. So let's continue to work towards that end.
Agreed. Carlo.
Just Biden yet, Trump yet. Look, the whole thing is coming down around our ears. Biden and Trump as the electoral candidates of choice right now. Come on. It's over. This empire is on the wane.
Thank
That's all I
God.
can say.
Thank God for that. We have been doing one show a week for the last 2 weeks. I keep saying we're going to do 2 a weeks, and then it falls through. So we're going to shoot for Friday, episode 37 on Friday. Wish us luck. Dust, thank you so much. You're a great comrade, and we need to keep the discussion going and agree to disagree on these other issues. They're not make or break issues. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Thanks, Dust.
All
right,
power to
guys.
the people.
All right.
Okay. See you next time.